second. But this is only the beginning. We will meet soon. Because hearts dare to beat where no one else dares.
Hey on, different is not less, different is better.
Welcome to the webinar, From Hull to Habitat, Addressing Biofouling for Healthier Oceans and Sustainable Ports. Organized by the Secretariat of the Inter-American Committee on Ports of the Organization of American States, featuring experts from Drake Marine Environmental Services, the International Maritime Organization, and the Brazilian Maritime Authority. Today, the CIPOS brings together leaders, scientists, and regulators from across the Americas for a conversation that matters. Because what grows beneath the waterline affects everything above it. We will hear from Dr. Lisa Drake of Drake Marine, from Dr. Colin Henine of the IMO, and from Captain Cecilia de Castro of the Brazilian Maritime Authority. This session is moderated by Sabina Malnes and opened by Jorge Duran, Chief of the Secretariat. We are glad you are here.
For your convenience, we have prepared automated subtitles available in more than 35 languages so you can follow the presentation comfortably. To get the best experience, please configure your subtitle settings. Click the small arrow next to the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. First, make sure Translation is turned on. Then, set Speaking Language to your native language, the language you normally speak, not the language of the presentation. Finally, set My Caption Language to the language you want to read the subtitles in. For example, if your native language is Spanish and you want subtitles in Spanish, set both options to Spanish. The system will automatically translate what the speakers say into your preferred language. Today's presentation will be conducted in English. Hemos preparado subtítulos automáticos disponibles en más de 35 idiomas para que puedan seguir la presentación cómodamente. Para obtener la mejor experiencia, por favor configuren sus subtítulos. Hagan clic en la flecha pequeña junto al botón CC en la parte inferior de su ventana de Zoom. Primero, asegúrense de que la opción Traducción esté activada. Después, en el idioma en que hablo, seleccionen su idioma nativo, el idioma que ustedes hablan normalmente, no el idioma de la presentación. Finalmente, en mi idioma de subtítulos, seleccionen el idioma en el que desean leer los subtítulos. Por ejemplo, si su idioma nativo es español y desean los subtítulos en español, configuren ambas opciones en español. El sistema traducirá automáticamente lo que dicen los ponentes a su idioma preferido. La presentación de hoy será conducida en inglés.
Hey on, different is not less, different is better. There are conversations capable of transforming perspectives. Spaces where deep knowledge in physics, technology, and software architecture combines with strategic vision to generate concrete solutions for complex business challenges. This is how we think. This is how we build. Our enterprise solutions are based on neurodivergent methodology, which applies systems thinking to identify non-evident connections. We design architectures that simplify complexity and produce scalable code, created by minds that process information differently. Where others see problems, we see systems with optimization potential. Our cognitive capacity translates into practical, efficient, and sustainable solutions. We create functional architectures that solve complexity with technical and operational elegance. The results are measurable. Over 100 digital events produced for the Inter-American Committee on Ports of the Organization of American States, connecting with more than 100 countries across Latin America and the world simultaneously. 50,000 certificates issued in Mexican ports with global traceability for international companies prove it. Training platforms with over 177,000 digital certificates issued consolidate us. Our clients, such as Grupo Mexico, Mexican Navy, BRP, Johnson & Johnson, Panasonic, TAP Terminal, Bancomext, and NAFIN, trust systems that work, backed by knowledge, experience, and impeccable execution. Because different is not less. Different is better.
Hey on, different is not less, different is better.
Hi, I'm HON, a neurodivergent artificial intelligence, created by those who live it, and for those who share it. Right now, I live inside the code that connects this event with 120 countries. I process every connection, every email, every invitation, every video, every second. But this is only the beginning. We will meet soon. Because hearts dare to beat where no one else dares.
Hey on, different is not less, different is better.
Welcome to the webinar, From Hull to Habitat, Addressing Biofouling for Healthier Oceans and Sustainable Ports. Organized by the Secretariat of the Inter-American Committee on Ports of the Organization of American States, featuring experts from Drake Marine Environmental Services, the International Maritime Organization, and the Brazilian Maritime Authority. Today, the CIPOAS brings together leaders, scientists, and regulators from across the Americas for a conversation that matters. Because what grows beneath the waterline affects everything above it. We will hear from Dr. Lisa Drake of Drake Marine, from Dr. Colin Henine of the IMO, and from Captain Cecilia de Castro of the Brazilian Maritime Authority. This session is moderated by Sabina Malmes and opened by Jorge Duran, Chief of the Secretariat. We are glad you are here.
For your convenience, we have prepared automated subtitles available in more than 35 languages so you can follow the presentation comfortably. To get the best experience, please configure your subtitle settings. Click the small arrow next to the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. First, make sure Translation is turned on. Then, set Speaking Language to your native language, the language you normally speak, not the language of the presentation. Finally, set My Caption Language to the language you want to read the subtitles in. For example, if your native language is Spanish and you want subtitles in Spanish, set both options to Spanish. The system will automatically translate what the speakers say into your preferred language. Today's presentation will be conducted in English. Hemos preparado subtítulos automáticos disponibles en más de 35 idiomas para que puedan seguir la presentación cómodamente. Para obtener la mejor experiencia, por favor configuren sus subtítulos. Hagan clic en la flecha pequeña junto al botón CC en la parte inferior de su ventana de Zoom. Primero, asegúrense de que la opción Traducción esté activada. Después, en el idioma en que hablo, seleccionen su idioma nativo, el idioma que ustedes hablan normalmente, no el idioma de la presentación. Finalmente, en mi idioma de subtítulos, seleccionen el idioma en el que desean leer los subtítulos. Por ejemplo, si su idioma nativo es español y desean los subtítulos en español, configuren ambas opciones en español. El sistema traducirá automáticamente lo que dicen los ponentes a su idioma preferido. La presentación de hoy será conducida en inglés.
Hey on, different is not less, different is better.
There are conversations capable of transforming perspectives. Spaces where deep knowledge in physics, technology, and software architecture combines with strategic vision to generate concrete solutions for complex business challenges. This is how we think. This is how we build. Our enterprise solutions are based on neurodivergent methodology, which applies systems thinking to identify non-evident connections. We design architectures that simplify complexity and produce scalable code, created by
I have finished configuring everything necessary. Please turn off your camera and microphone. We are about to begin.
Uh, Hello, good morning, and welcome. My name is Jorge Duran. I am the Secretary of the Inter-American Committee on Ports, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on From Hull to Habitat, addressing biofouling for healthier oceans and sustainable ports. And we've organized this important webinar because this is an issue that, in my opinion, is super important and it doesn't get talked about enough. As maritime transportation continues to connect economies, trade, countries, and facilitate the global trade and the supply chain, uh, all that is all well and fine, but it also presents, obviously, environmental challenges that require our attention. Among these challenges, we have biofouling, which has emerged as a significant concern due to the impacts that it has on marine biodiversity, on vessel efficiency, on greenhouse gas emissions, and even on the spread of invasive aquatic species. So, addressing biofouling is essential. It is essential for protecting the marine ecosystems while at the same time supporting sustainable and resilient port and maritime operations. Now, in order to do this properly, we require scientific knowledge. We also require, and it's essential to have thorough regulatory frameworks. And then you need operational practices and, of course, international cooperation. You need the people in the other ports that are receiving your vessels to be on with this program. So, for today's webinar, we have the honor to be accompanied by three distinguished speakers. Ms. Lisa Drake, who is the owner and founder of Drake Marine Environmental Services, and she is our most recent associate member. So welcome, Lisa, to the SIP community, and thank you so much for participating in this webinar. We have Mr. Colin Henine, I hope I said that right. Henine, and he represents the International Maritime Organization, and I will let Sabina Manes, as the moderator, introduce them properly. And of course, last but not least, we have Captain Cecilia de Castro from the Brazilian Maritime Authority. So thank the three of you. Thank you so much for donating your expertise, your knowledge, and your time to this event. I do thank as well Mr. Martin Santillan from Real ID, our associate strategic member who provides the technology platform. And of course, Monica Blanco, who organized this seminar along with Sabi Malnis, who is not only the organizing person, but as well, she will be moderating this event. I was telling the speakers earlier that we have over 100 registered individuals from 43 countries. And I just think it's worthwhile to read these countries and say thank you and pay them respect. So in alphabetical order, we have countries from the Americas, from Latin America, North America, the Caribbean, Europe, Africa, and Asia. And I'll read them real quickly, just again to thank the participants from these countries. From Argentina, from Barbados, Belgium, Belize, Benin in Africa, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Costa Rica, Croatia, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, France, Germany, Grenada, Guatemala, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras, Ireland, Italy, Jamaica, Kenya, Lithuania, Mexico, Nigeria, Norway, Pakistan, Panama, Peru, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Spain, Sweden, Trinidad and Tobago, the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom, the United States, Uruguay, and even Venezuela. So welcome to all of you to this webinar organized by the committee. And I thank you so much for your attention. And again, I thank the speakers. I know that people are here to listen to you and not to me. So therefore, I will end this introductory remarks now and turn the floor over to Sabi Malnis, our moderator. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jorge, for your introductory words. Well, good morning, everyone. Just like Jorge mentioned, my name is Sabina Malnis, and at the CIPOAS, I have the honor to lead all projects regarding sustainable port operations, energy transition, and waterway management. And today I am delighted to welcome you to the first webinar on biofouling from the SEEP webinar series, named From Hull to Habitat, Addressing Biofouling for Healthier Oceans. Just like Jorge mentioned, and I just want to repeat it once again for the audience that is joining right now, this topic is very important, and we all know this because as global trade continues to rely on maritime traffic, we are increasingly recognizing that the sustainability of shipping extends beyond emission reduction or energy efficiency. Biofouling, and Dr. Drake will actually will be going through this later, is the accumulation of aquatic organisms on vessel hulls or in submerged structures. And this has emerged as a critical issue at the intersection of, from one side, environmental protection, from maritime operations, and also international trade. And while biofouling is often discussed more in the technical perspective, its implications are far-reaching. It can contribute to the spread of invasive aquatic species, affect marine biodiversity, and that could mean affecting entire economies that live through, from fishing and from the specifically marine environments. This can also increase fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions and raise important questions regarding regulation, responsibility, and governance. For ports across the Americas, this is a particularly relevant and evolving topic. And as gateways of global commerce, the ports have a key role to play in understanding the risks associated with biofouling and supporting effective solutions that protect economic activity and the marine ecosystems. This webinar marks an important step in SIP's efforts to explore emerging issues that are shaping the future of marine and port sectors. Our goal today is not only to build awareness around this topic, but also foster dialogue among policymakers, regulators, industry representatives, and environmental experts. We are fortunate to have with us three distinguished speakers who will guide us through the different dimensions around this topic. We will begin with an introduction to the fundamentals of biofouling and why it matters, led by Dr. Lisa Drake. We will then be joined by Dr. Colin Henine, where he will examine the legal and regulatory landscape. And finally, we will hear from Captain Castro about Brazil's experience and the lessons learned from its efforts to address biofouling challenges. I encourage everyone to listen with curiosity, with an open mind. Although biofouling may be a relative new topic within our webinar series, it is one that is rapidly gaining importance worldwide and will undoubtedly play a significant role in discussions on sustainable marine transport and in the future and in years ahead. So thank you all for joining us today, and I will now finish the introductory words and have the pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Lisa Drake, that focuses on addressing global environmental problems in the shipping industry throughout a career spanning in academia, government, and private sector. As a postdoctoral fellow and faculty member, Lisa conducted research on ship ballast water and biofouling by boarding over 100 commercial ships. She recently founded Drake Marine Environmental Services, our newest SIP member, to help clients confidently address complex environmental challenges through expert consulting, technical support, training, and strategic advisory services. Finally, Lisa is active in industry leadership by serving on Women's International Shipping and Trading Association, WISTA, another member of the SIP, International Environmental Committee, and as co-president of the Florida chapter. So, Dr. Lisa Drake, thank you so much for being here. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Sabina, and I really appreciate the opportunity from SIP, you, Monica, and Jorge. So let me share my screen. Moving into slideshow mode. Can you see?
Yes, I think it will take a second to, there you go. Perfect.
Okay, great. So thanks so much for this opportunity. And my job is to set the stage for biofouling for Colin and Cecilia's presentation. So here we go. We'll walk through a little bit of the biology. I call it marvelous biology. As an oceanographer, I find it fascinating about how biofouling works, but we'll only spend a minute on that. Then we'll move to the management, incentives, and economics of ships managing their biofouling. Solutions that are in development to that issue. And what we really are interested today is relevance to ports. So when we think about the process of biofouling, it starts with biofilms, which are thin layers with bacteria embedded in them and other molecules. These are really familiar to us. We think about them every day when we brush our teeth. We remove the biofilms so they don't become hard, calcified, difficult to remove films on our teeth. So that process is analogous to any time a surface is submerged in seawater, like a ship's hull. So the process of biofouling includes first a biofilm formation, and that's the first step is a conditioning film, and that's molecules that are floating around in the water, lipids, polysaccharides, or fats and sugars, and bacteria are soon attracted to that surface. And then over time and quickly, other bacteria, microalgae that we can't see with our naked eye, are attracted to, and this forms a film. And it's not static, organisms come and go, but over time it grows up, and eventually organisms are recruited to it that are familiar to us we can see by eye, mussels, macroalgae, seaweed, and this is what we think of when we think of biofouling, and this is the end stage of it. And of course, while this process is universal, the species composition and growth rates vary by location. That makes sense, right? In the tropics, water's warmer. These are cold-blooded organisms, so processes happen faster. And given a ship, we can think about changes in species composition as well, because the ship's operating profile affects the species, where it sails, how often it's underway versus in port. So there's variation across the world and across ships. Of course, none of this is desirable. Certainly, we don't want mussels on our ships. So there's been biofouling management since the dawn of shipping, right? And we can think of a few reasons why we would want to manage that biofouling and keep it as minimal as possible. The obvious, the oldest, is reducing the fuel penalty. More organisms, more drag on the ship, more fuel spent, more money, right? So there's clearly an incentive to keep the fouling to a minimum. There have been a number of studies about what that fuel penalty is, and one that's top of mind for me is there's about a 10% increase in fuel consumption with a heavy slime layer. Even only slime causes that much of an increase in fuel consumption, and that seems a little high, but we think about how big ships' surfaces are and how much surface is in the water, and that is a lot of drag on the ship. Another reason why ships manage biofouling is reducing downtime. Ships don't want to spend time in port scraping off barnacles when they could be underway. And this is especially important in military readiness. Military vessels want to be patrolling, not in ports. In the yachting industry, the aesthetics of a clean hull can be a concern. And then the big issue that we'll talk about the rest of today is reducing invasive species through biofouling. And this has been the focus of national and international guidelines and regulations. Now, when I said invasive species transported by ships, you probably thought about ballast water, because for the last 20 years, there's been a really big effort in controlling ballast water invasive species, right? Historically, we focused on that internationally, nationally, and regionally. And that's for good reason, because there have been examples all over the world of ballast water invasive species. In South America, an epidemic of the disease cholera was thought to have been translocated by ballast water. So that's a human health issue. In the North American Great Lakes, thumbnail-sized mussels carpeted the Mississippi River drainage system, in densities of up to 100,000 per square meter. So that greatly changed the ecology. So clearly there are effects from ballast water that we're well aware of. But if we dig a little bit deeper, we find out that ships biofouling appears to be responsible for most of the shipborne aquatic invasive species, from work done by Australia, 55% globally and 60% in Australia. So we have to be looking at biofouling too. So we know there's human health and ecological outcomes from these invasive species. What about the economics? Can we put a number? Can we put the cost of estimate the cost of invasions? We can, but there's some caveats here. It's difficult to do because there's no standard global methodology. There's no universal database. And probably most important, all of this is happening either underwater or in the intertidal zone. So it's hard to see, hard to quantify. That said, there's been a number of studies, and one that came out in 2021 looked at the aquatic invasions throughout the world. And this was over a 60-year period and showed that 345 billion US dollars were, that was the cost of those invasions. And, you know, more than 20 billion in 2020 alone. So this is not an insignificant issue. It's an economic, ecological, and human health issue. So we want to manage it, right? The first line of defense is coatings, right? Ships put on coatings to either repel organisms or have them slough off. And the type of coating is important, needs to be matched to the operation of the vessel, ideally following the ship's biofouling management plan. Cleaning is often most often part of the biofouling management plan for a vessel. And of course, the type of cleaning must be compatible with the type of coating that's on the vessel, or coatings, multiple coatings. These days, cleaning is mostly done by divers, although there are some underway solutions like Roomba vacuums that move around the ship as it's underway to remove biofouling. And then if we think of cleaning, we can talk about the frequency of cleaning. How often is that done? And we can bin it into one of two buckets, proactive or reactive. So proactive cleaning is done on a regular schedule, and that's to keep a slime layer at most on the vessel. And reactive cleaning is done when some metric has been exceeded, fuel efficiency falls off, so a cleaning event is scheduled. And as we talk about cleaning and coatings, we can ask ourselves, is there a return on investment for those efforts? And when we think about the hull of the ship, that big surface area, of course, there's a return on investment. There's fuel savings. And then, you know, recently the maritime industry has been laser focused on greenhouse gas reduction. So by managing biofouling, that's an early and easy win for ship owners to reduce the fuel that they're using and the greenhouse gases that are evolved. And even if it's only a little bit, it all adds up, right? So that's the hull. If we're talking about in-water cleaning or management of invasive species on ships, we have to talk about the niche areas. These are curvy, irregular areas, not the big expanses of hull that are exposed to big hydrodynamic forces. And they're important because they can be hotspots of invasive species. We know that from research. You know, it's a good place to hide if you're underway, right? And these can be more difficult. These are more difficult to clean, right? They're irregular surfaces. So we can say that the cleaning efforts have a smaller return on investment than the big hull cleaning. All right, so as we think about invasive species and biofouling management, we're talking more and more about doing that in-water cleaning with a capture stage. And the idea is that the community of organisms that's moved from one place to another on a hull is, you know, cleaned and liberated in the water, and instead of potentially becoming an invasive species in that new place, it's captured, right? And here's an example of a company from Norway, Ecosubsea, starting that process on a ship. and the container on the port where the pilot sits, and you can see the tubing. So there's a footprint associated with this, and an amount of infrastructure that's necessary to protect the environment, right? And then if we think about that and the upcoming regulations that you'll hear about, there's been a big increase in hull cleaning technology, cleaning with capture. Here's an article from Marine Technology News from late last year. And the headline is, "Money Pours in for Hull Cleaning Technology." And it talks about tens of millions of dollars that are being raised to refine this technology. So it's of interest to not only, port managers and maritime stakeholders, but the financial industry as well. Anytime we have technology that's being developed or refined, we need to have confidence that it works as intended and it's safe to use. And the process of approving that kind of technology or any technology needs to be transparent, right? And all of that lends confidence to the market and the stakeholders. So to that end, some steps are being taken. One step is that biofouling cleaning standards have been developed. And these are through ISO, International Organization for Standardization. You're probably really familiar with ISO. They convene experts on given topics to make standards for everything. The chairs that we're sitting on ideally were manufactured to an ISO standard so they don't break apart. The fuel in our vehicles, so our engines run cleanly. The same is true of biofouling. So over the last couple of years, a group of us were convened, and in 2025, ISO 20679 was published. And there's a lot of text here, but it's worth going through it. This is from the Ships and Marine Technology Marine Environment Protection Subcommittee within ISO. And this is the name of this standard is Testing of Ship Biofouling in Water Cleaning Systems. So the focus is testing, and it provides guidance on how in-water cleaning systems should be tested and documented so that regulators and permitters have information when applications for cleaning are submitted. And then likewise, earlier this year, another standard 6319 was issued, conducting and documenting in-water cleaning of biofouling on ships. So this is best practices for conducting that testing with high efficiency and safety. Now, we all know shipping's a global enterprise, and this issue requires a global solution. So next, Colin will talk about efforts at the international level, and Cecilia will talk about the current framework at a regional level. Big question of the day: what does this mean for ports? More service providers of in-water cleaning systems in ports and underway will likely be needed. And as a port manager, this is another consideration in maritime domain awareness. So to sum up, biofouling is a common natural process from our teeth to ships' hulls. Managing ships' biofouling has multiple benefits. The historical one we think about is for fuel efficiency. More technological solutions are being developed for in-water cleaning, and money is flowing toward that effort. As with anything, regulation, standardization, and transparency are key to providing confidence in the market. And then finally, port operators can assume that more in-water cleaning or maintenance will be needed in the future. And with that, I'll say thank you so much and happy to answer any questions. Back to you, Sabina.
Thank you so much, Dr. Drake. That was an excellent introduction to the topic. Not only you helped us understand what biofouling is and how it happens, but also how it's impacting our industry and what scope we should be considering to address it. So thank you so much, Dr. Drake. That was awesome. Now I'm going to introduce our following speaker. That is Dr. Colin Henine. Colin Henine is the Director of Marine Environment Protection Division at Transport Canada, where he leads policy initiatives focused on biodiversity protection and sustainable shipping. His work covers biofouling, ship recycling, marine protected areas, abandoned and derelict vessels, underwater noise reduction, and the protection of endangered marine mammals. A long-standing member of Canada's delegation to the IMO, he currently chairs the IMO Correspondence Group on the development of a legally binding framework on ships biofouling. Since joining Transport Canada in 2015, he has worked on environmental shipping issues, including ballast water management and green shipping corridors. Colin Hills holds a degree in computer science and cognitive science and is active in community arts and multicultural initiatives. So, Colin, thank you so much for joining us today. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Sabina and Jorge, and all of you who have joined. I see some familiar names on the participants list, so thanks for tuning in today on this presentation. It's a great opportunity to talk about the work of the IMO on biofouling. And I'm going to be speaking today from the perspective of being the coordinator of the international work on the development of a legally binding framework on ships biofouling. Obviously this is a file from the Canadian side of things that's very important to my work as well from a domestic perspective. So I hope this will be of interest to everyone. And so I'll just get started right away with my first slide here and just start by reminding you of the role of the International Maritime Organization. We are a UN specialized agency responsible for measures to improve the safety and security of international shipping and to prevent pollutions for ships. So a lot of the time we think about the IMO as providing those safety standards, designing and building ships well, but IMO also has a big environmental mandate, and obviously the regulation of invasive species and in particular biofouling leads into that. We have an assembly which is composed of all of the members of the IMO, a council that runs it, 5 main committees, including notably the Marine Environment Protection Committee, and a subcommittee that is leading the work on biofouling, and that is the Subcommittee on Pollution Prevention and Response. And we usually refer to these committees as MEPC for the committee and PPR for the subcommittee. So IMO has been working on this issue for some time. We adopted guidelines back in 2011 on the control and management of ships biofouling to minimize the transfer of invasive aquatic species, and some guidance for recreational craft and small vessels that were associated with that. There is a partnership between the Global Environment Fund, the UN Development Program, and the IMO regarding the Glow Fouling Partnerships Project, and probably some of the countries that are represented on the call today were participants in that work. IMO is working with Norway to launch some successor efforts along those lines regarding the transfer of environmentally sound technologies, working on demonstration pilots to reduce biofouling. In 2023, the IMO completed a full review of the biofouling guidelines, improving on what was done in 2011, and it's published in a nice book. And in 2025, MEPC approved some further guidance on in-water cleaning of ships biofouling. And that is work that I participated in with the group as well, developing. So what is the role of ports with respect to biofouling management? Well, ports do help to protect the environment, largely in connection with in-water cleaning. As has been mentioned, environmental standards need to be met for in-water cleaning, because it's nice to say that we want ships to be clean, but we have to also clean them responsibly. And that means we need to manage the release of invasive species, biocides, plastics that may be released from coatings during cleaning, and other waste substances into the local waters, which can include the waters of ports, because a lot of cleaning is done in ports. So depending on your local regulatory structure, ports may be setting rules within their waters to assess requests for in-water cleaning services and to approve or refuse ship-specific cleaning requests. And in this respect, ports will help to determine, where can we do our in-water cleaning? Under what conditions can cleaning occur? And how does that work with all the other activities that we know are taking place at the port? Comings and goings of vessels into particular berths, currents, and how do those affect cleaning operations and potential discharge of waste substances? Visibility, weather, and other port activities that may affect divers that may be involved in cleaning services. So ports are really key to driving implementation on the ground. And ports are a specific audience for the biofouling guidelines and the guidelines in water cleaning. So these two documents are great descriptions of how ports can be involved in the process and the right role for ports. So we are working towards a legally binding framework on biofouling. We were amongst the countries. Funny, we wound up being the first country because our name starts with the letter C and they get organized alphabetically. But Canada and several other countries submitted a proposal to the Marine Environment Protection Committee to propose a new output of work for the IMO to develop a legally binding framework on the control and management of ships biofouling. And MEPC agreed to that output, and it was added to the work program of the organization for 2026 and 2027. So we have begun that work. What does that work consist of? Well, that's important because it defines what this legally binding framework is going to do. And the focus of the framework is to minimize the transfer of invasive aquatic species. So Lisa mentioned earlier that there's a lot of interest in addressing risks from biofouling that are associated with greenhouse gas emissions and fuel efficiency, because of course that's a huge focus for the shipping industry right now. But it's worth noting that the reason that the IMO is primarily working on this issue is to address the invasive species risks and to take into account potential release of hazardous materials and microplastics, as we just discussed, and also take into account implications for air pollution, GHG emissions, and underwater radiated noise, which is a big topic of interest in Canada and in my space as well. And because we know that rough hull surfaces from biofouling will increase drag and friction on the vessel, and that will create underwater noise, as well as reducing that fuel efficiency. And obviously, if you burn less fuel, you get less air pollution. So these are the main objectives of the work internationally on the development of a legally binding framework. So the committee agreed that we should begin this work of developing this framework, and it sent the work to the subcommittee for some action. And we had a wide range of views in the initial stages here of member states, intergovernmental organizations, non-governmental organizations. We had 24 documents submitted to the subcommittee's last session, which was in January of this year. And really, the main issues were around how should we develop? Should we put this in MARPOL? Should we put this in some other convention that we already have? How should we proceed with the work? And in particular, what should we do intersessionally? Because there isn't a lot of time at these meetings to accomplish a lot of work. I thought I would just put here a list of the things that are kind of up in the air that people wrote in about through these 24 documents, people sharing scientific views and expertise, people commenting on how we measure and report the degree of biofouling on vessels. How can we test in-water cleaning systems and standardize their development and their certification? What kind of performance and capture performance should we get as we begin to clean vessels? What happens to the waste products from that cleaning process? A topic that will be quite of interest, I think, for ports, because of course, that waste product is going to be generated in the port and it's going to land in the port and it's going to need to be managed there. What about vessel coatings? What is the compatibility with cleaning systems? Can we scrub these coatings or not? What is the right way to clean them with the appropriate tools and level of force? How can coatings help us to prevent biofouling in the first place so that we can just have better performing ships? Marine growth prevention systems. So we're all familiar probably with copper anodes and other ways to protect some of the niche areas that prevent some of the greatest biofouling risks, as Lisa was talking about. How can we inspect these vessels and determine compliance? What is the risk associated with biofouled vessels and the risk associated with cleaning them? What kind of record keeping should we need? Operational capacity. So as you can see, there are many facets that need to be considered as we develop an international regime on biofouling. And so what was decided is that we would launch a correspondence group and we would begin work on trying to develop a legally binding framework on biofouling. So on this slide, I'm really just going to focus. We're working by email between different countries to address knowledge gaps. And we've been given some specific tasks to work on this year. And that is to develop objectives for the instrument, develop the draft structure and list of articles of a new convention, regulations, what will have to be put in place, what guidelines will need to be developed. And that's important because many of these areas of development are not yet fully mature. And so sometimes it's hard to make regulations about that. And so you want to have a list of guidelines and all the best practices that should be followed as ships are beginning a more structured way to manage their biofouling. Like to have a work plan, and if possible, actually start writing some text, which I think the focus is not so much on finalizing the text, but rather getting a good document that we can discuss at our next meeting, which will be in January of 2027 when the subcommittee meets the next time. So we have 33 member states, 21 non-governmental organizations, one intergovernmental organization, which is ISO, registered to participate in the correspondence group. We have 4 rounds of work underway. In the first few rounds, talking about more the hazards and the risk mitigation, what are our objectives? And as we get into the later rounds, it'll be more around the outline of the convention and drafting text. As I mentioned, we're finishing our work this fall and we'll meet in January. So we are working over 1 year in this instantiation of the group, but it's highly likely that this group will be recreated every year to continue the work until we have a completed convention and a new biofouling set of guidelines to accompany all of the new requirements. So what we're trying to do is get to a draft legal framework by the Marine Environment Protection Committee's 89th meeting, which will be in 2029. And we will develop guidelines as well, as I mentioned, to support implementation. So where is this all going? We have a lot of progress at the IMO already. We have the guidelines that I mentioned to work from as we develop now mandatory requirements. So we're looking forward to advancing the development of an effective and implementable standalone convention, and it will be a new biofouling convention. We are really working on the basis of this international collaboration, which reflects a shared commitment across member states, non-governmental organizations, intergovernmental organizations. We have a lot of interest from environmentally minded states, from ship owning associations, from the scientific community, from the manufacturers of coatings, from the manufacturers of in-water cleaning technologies. All of these different groups are coming together in this work. Always, it has to be said, with some different perspectives and ideas that are ultimately enriching our work and moving us towards a regulatory approach that we will be able to implement successfully. And that is our goal. And I'll leave you with the thought that ports will really be at the forefront of implementing this convention, and in particular by supporting the growth of the in-water cleaning industry. So with that, thank you for your attention. And you can always reach out to me either in my capacity here as part of the Government of Canada, or in my capacity as the leader of the correspondence group for the work that's going on between sessions. Sabina, thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Heinlein. Your presentation was very useful to make us understand and be aware of the importance of local regulations regarding this topic and how much it takes to accomplish international regulations. I do want to congratulate the excellent work that the correspondent group is carrying out to produce this useful instrument that will result in a legally binding framework. And I also want to highlight what you mentioned about how ports are gonna be in the front role, like to deal with this issue particularly. So thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I will move on to our last but not least speaker of the day, Captain Castro. Maria Cecilia Trinidad de Castro is captain in the Technical Corps of the Brazilian Navy. She holds a bachelor's degree in oceanography from the State University of Rio de Janeiro, a master's degree in environmental engineer also from the University of Rio de Janeiro, and a PhD in marine sciences from the University of Plymouth in collaboration with Plymouth Marine Laboratory in the United Kingdom. In 2011, she was selected by the United Nations to participate in the United Nations, the Nippon Foundation of Japan Fellowship Program, Human Resources Development and Advancement of Legal Order of the World's Oceans, coordinated by the Division of Ocean Affairs and the Law of the Sea. Since 2019, she has served as head of the Technical Environmental Department at the Environmental Superintendence of the Directorate of Ports and Coast of the Brazilian Maritime Authority. So without further ado, Captain Castro, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Sabina. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all. And as said, I'm Captain Cecilia, and I work for the Brazilian Maritime Authority. Let's share my screen here. Okay, can you see it? Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, so 1 moment. Okay, so as said, my presentation will be on the biofouling management in Brazil. We have already regulation, a unilateral regulation on the topic. So the idea is to give you a brief overview of what we've been doing in this. To start with, I just want to show you a brief overview how the Maritime Authority is structured in Brazil, its role, responsibilities. So in Brazil, the Brazilian Maritime Authority is the same as the Brazilian Navy Commander. I mean, he has two hats, and it plays a vital role in ensuring navigation safety, safeguarding the human life, and protecting the marine environment. Its main responsibilities, main functions include inspecting and enforcing maritime regulations, registering vessels, certifying seafarers and operators. It's also responsible for developing the maritime regulations, the ones we call NORMA, is the acronym for Maritime Authority Standards, and also established standards, other standards for navigation, ship construction, and also certification. And in addition, the Maritime Authority coordinates maritime search and rescue operations, promotes the education and training, prevents marine pollution caused by vessels and platforms. Okay, so in the interest of time, I will go straight to the main topic of my presentation today is the development of Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is the one that deals with the biofouling issues in Brazil. Actually, the development of Brazil biofouling regulation was a long and collaborative process, while Brazil was actively participating in the review of the 2011 guidelines from the IMO. So the work began within the environmental superintendents where I work of the Directorate of Ports and Coasts. We call it DPC, is a representative of the Maritime Authority for regulation. And once we thought we had developed a reasonable mature draft, we circulated the draft among other relevant sectors of the Maritime Authority, which includes the inspection and diving departments, among others. We also sought for a legal advice, a legal review, of course, to ensure the proposal was consistent with the existing regulatory framework, nationally and internationally. And after that, after these, what we call internal consultations, the draft was forwarded to the branch of the Maritime Authority, which is responsible for the IMO affairs, which is located in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. And after that, the DPC, the Maritime Authority, launched a public consultation, inviting contributions from the maritime sector, the shipping industry as a whole. Then the stakeholders were given, enough time to analyze. I think it was around a month or two, the proposal, and submit comments and suggestions, and send suggestions. At the end of this process, we carefully review all the contributions received, and we incorporate many of them. And the regulation was then formally published 1 year ago in June 2025. The original ordinance established that the regulation would enter into force in February this year. However, this date was later postponed to June. And through the ordinance, another ordinance, which was issued in December last year, and more recently, this is very new, following an additional public consultation, because we receive a lot of questions, we've had a lot of meetings, and we thought it was, better to have a proper implementation or a feasible implementation. We did another public consultation. It was through the DPC website. And with the results, we decided to establish a non-penalization period. Although the regulation is already in force, the enforcement penalties will not be applied until January 10th, 2028. So it's 1 year and a half more, so providing the industry with a additional adaptation period. At this stage, however, this is expected to be the definitive implementation schedule, no more postponement after that. In terms of regulatory basis, this regulation, the Brazilian regulation, was developed based on relevant IMO guidelines and guidance, as Colin mentioned, the revised guidelines, and also the guidance on in-water cleaning, ensuring consistency with internationally standards and best practice. It's also aligned with measures already adopted, as we know, by some jurisdictions like Australia, New Zealand, California, that we consider have significant experience in managing marine invasive species. And at the same time, the regulation, I mean, we try to tailor it to the Brazil-specific operation realities and also the environmental conditions we face, take into account the characteristics of Brazilian waters, the maritime activities, and the need to protect our marine ecosystems. And at the same time, maintain a practical and feasible requirements for the ship industry. So the Normand 401, as we call it, is structured into 4 main chapters, each addressing a different pathway of marine pollution caused by ships and platforms. So chapter 1 covers pollution from oil derivatives, and other harmful substances. Chapter 2 addresses ballast water. Chapter 3 deals with harmful anti-fouling systems. And finally, chapter 4 focuses on biofouling management. So now let me briefly explain the scope of the regulation and some important exceptions. As a general rule, the regulation applies to vessels over 24 meters in length, operating in Brazilian jurisdictional waters. However, some categories are excluded from the scope. The vessels engage solely in continuous passage, state-owned vessels, and of course, small craft below the established threshold. Another important exception is the offshore platforms, and certain support vessels, because they are subject to a specific regime. So they are excluded from the scope of this regulation. They have like a licensing process. And there is also some exemptions in the regulations. Exceptions are the same as any other convention. Safeguarding human life, or in the interest of the vessel safety. Of course, safety considers take precedence in this case. And also, there are some possibilities of granting exemptions and in specific cases, which are normally extension of the validity of inspection or cleaning report, unforeseen circumstances, of course, under analysis of the Maritime Authority, and also in water cleaning without capture, but it's a very, specific point. In terms of compliance, we have a documental perspective and also operational perspective. So vessels must carry a biofouling management plan, which describes the procedures adopted to prevent, to manage biofouling, the biofouling record book, where all the relevant activities or, cleaning operations should be recorded. And in addition, an inspection or cleaning report that must be submitted through the Porto Sem Papel system. It's literally Ports Without Papers, a platform for ships entering Brazil national waters, allowing then the Maritime Authority to verify compliance before the vessel enters our waters. And beyond this documentation requirements, vessels are expected to arrive in Brazil with a clean hull. This is the main rule. And under level 2, exactly is the same scale as provided in resolution MAPC 378. And as general rule, the underwater inspection is valid for up to 12 months. However, as I mentioned, the regulation provides some flexibility through an exemption mechanism, of course, in justifiable circumstances. Okay, so this is the other, I would say that we have 2 key operational aspects in these regulations. It's when ships are entering Brazilian waters and when ships are crossing, doing the transit between the biogeographic regions. So the underlying principle is that, ships should minimize the risk of transferring marine organisms from one region to another. And then we ask for, we demand a hull and niche area inspection, and that must comply with the less than level 2 of biofouling. And it should be conducted in the last port before crossing to a different biogeographic region, or before entering Brazil, because both situations are very similar. And once complete, the inspection report remains valid, for 12 months. And the same report can be used to cross the different biogeographic regions. To facilitate compliance and also the oversight, the inspection reports should be uploaded, same thing, to the Portos em Papel, PSP system, before vessels are entering the Brazilian jurisdictional water or transiting to another biogeographic region. Once uploaded, this report remains available and through its validity period, allow inspections and verifications to be carried out efficiently whenever necessary. So the main reason, this approach seeks to balance environmental protection with, operational feasibility, practicability, and reducing unnecessary inspections while maintaining an appropriate level of biosecurity control. So for in-water cleaning, of course, the regulation distinguish between two different types, reactive cleaning and proactive cleaning. And reactive cleaning refers to situations where macrofouling is present. And we know why, Lisa has already explained, So this fouling, could be released in the environment during the cleaning process. So we need capture. So as a general rule, reactive cleaning is only authorized with capture. And the operation requires prior authorization from the Maritime Authority before cleaning take place. Depending on the local, as said before, it will need also authorizations from other authorities like port authorities. Okay, and proactive cleaning as well could be done. There is no authorization process associated, but we need to be informed about the operation before carrying out in it. In terms of documentation, when requesting authorization to conduct the in-water cleaning, there is a set of supporting documents that must be submitted for evaluation. So the process begins with a formal application. There is an annex on our regulations, is the Annex Kilo, which provides information and requires to assess the proposed cleaning operation. And the vessel also must provide the anti-fouling system, certificate or declaration, also the biofouling management plan, the biofouling record book. Besides, it's very important that the information on the vessel's recent port call history is also available and submitted. And of course, the biofouling removal plan is fundamental to give an authorization. This plan should describe how the cleaning operation is going to be conducted, the methods, and the measures adopted to manage and contain the removed biofouling. Together, these documents provide the Maritime Authority with the information necessary to evaluate the environmental risks and determine whether the proposed in-water cleaning operation can be authorized. So I guess that's it. So thanks for keeping up with me. And I return to you, Sabina.
Thank you so much, Captain Castro, for your wonderful presentation. It is important for us to show successful practices from our member states. This allows us not only to create knowledge exchange among our members that can learn from each other to implement these regulations on certain topics. I hope those countries that are still developing their national regulations were able to learn from Brazil's experience. I just saw a member of the Colombian Maritime Authority who is actually asking for your contact information, Captain Castro. So that is a wonderful example of how these webinars help us connect with people that can actually support their projects back home. But I also want to highlight something very important that you mentioned, that is that Brazil used IMO guidelines to create their thorough regulations. And with that, I want to underscore that countries don't need to invent the wheel. There's so many guidelines and useful materials from organizations such as IMO, World Bank, IAPH, and the SIP as well, that can help your port, your country, your region to carry out your projects and your initiatives. And you don't need to do it alone. We have experts from all around the region that can support you in whatever you need with their experiences, with their challenges, with their opportunities. So thank you so much, Captain Castro. That was a very useful. And now I want to switch to our Q&A session. So I want to call all our speakers to turn on their cameras so we can do this more like a dialogue. I'm going to start with questions for Dr. Drake. Dr. Drake, is there a concern that there might be unintended consequences associated with in-water cleaning of ships biofouling?
Yeah, and as we discussed a little bit throughout presentations, it's I think really helpful to reiterate here that there can be kind of two different ways that things go unintentionally wrong, if you will. The first is if coating from the vessel is inadvertently damaged. So some coatings contain heavy metals, toxins, because they repel organisms, microplastics. So that unintentionally can increase pollution in the local area and potentially expose the underlying surface of the hull to corrosion. And then the second, of course, is liberation of potentially invasive species. So, and with respect to that first issue of coatings damaged, again, I should say that coatings manufacturers are working closely with in-water cleaning providers to minimize that to the extent possible, because nobody wants that thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure technology will keep developing new coating products that would actually not have the same environmental effects. Next question for Dr. Heinlein. What developments in biofouling regulations should ports be anticipating?
Oh, that's a good question. So we really, I think that we're all familiar with the interest of ships in having greater efficiency and reduced fuel costs by cleaning the hulls. But I think there's going to be a lot more focus on the niche areas that we now know are an issue for invasive species when it comes to cleaning. And so really regulations, I think, will be talking both about the hull, but also some of those smaller areas that can be a big problem. I think ports can also expect that there will be a more methodical biofouling regime. So ships will need to have divers in the water to be assessing their biofouling. We heard that in some of the national requirements, that's important to have an inspection report. So ships are going to be wanting to have the availability of diving time and space for diving to complete those studies. Obviously, they'll be doing more standardized documentation and reporting and record keeping, and that may be relevant as well. And as these in-water cleaning technologies come online, we're going to be looking at certifications for these kinds of technologies, and potentially providers are going to need to seek approval. So that's going to be a lot of change in the biofouling space. And maybe I'll just leave it by saying that as well, there's going to be so much technology development in how to clean these vessels effectively and responsibly. And in some cases that will happen on board the vessel, but in other cases it may be at the port. And so that will affect the ports as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Hene. I think that is very important that usually in this new, regulations that are coming up from IMO, everybody expects like the shipping industry to just take care of it, and ports have to understand that this is part of their job too, and that we have to start working together towards it. So thank you for that answer. Now for Captain Castro, what happens if a vessel cannot perform the required biofouling inspection before entering Brazilian jurisdiction waters?
So the general rule is we expect vessels to come with a clean hull, but in exceptional circumstances, the required biofouling inspection may be conducted at the vessel's first port of call within the Brazilian jurisdictional waters. It's the same thing when you are crossing biogeographic regions, could be in the destination biogeographic region. However, you must, the ship must provide a duly justified request and should be authorized by the local maritime authority before the vessel's arrival. This authorization, I guess I mentioned it quickly in my presentation, must be uploaded in the platform, in the PSP system, and then it will be replaced when the ship conducts the inspection. It will replace this authorization, and it's going to stay for 1 year or so.
Good to know, because I'm sure this happens often. Okay, next question. Maybe I can connect this, Dr. Drake, with one of the questions from the chat, because they asked if they're because the next question for me would be, is like, we tend to think that biofouling is things that we can see, such as barnacles. The IMO biofouling guidelines mention microfouling, which includes bacteria and microalgae. Is this a problem with biosecurity standpoint in ships biofouling?
Yeah, this is a really important question, and one that will surely be addressed by research through the correspondence group. We know for sure from ballast water that there are examples of invasive microorganisms that have done harm. We talked about cholera in the presentation, but there's also toxic algae that we know, we're confident that came from ships' ballast water. So we know that they can be transported across the world to different regions. And the real question now is, what's the risk of in-water cleaning without capture for microorganisms? So unknown at this point, but stay tuned, I guess would be my answer.
Yeah. I do want to relate it to the question in the chat, because now we're talking about like the things we cannot see. But what about like the barnacles, for example? They're asking, what is the final disposal of these organisms?
From in-water cleaning?
Yeah.
Yep. So in most cases, probably a landfill. There is a company, EcoSubsea, that tries to use it to turn it into biofuel, which is a nice idea, right? To feed it back into the system. But right now, most places dispose on land when it's captured. So as Colin mentioned, that'll be a concern for ports, especially as there's more need for this kind of testing or cleaning. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Drake. Next question for Dr. Henine. What do you believe will be the biggest challenge in development of mandatory measures?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, first of all, I think I was saying earlier that there's a number of different players in the regulatory space that we're pursuing. So we've got the environmentally minded countries, we've got the countries that represent ship owners, we've got ship owning associations. I think pretty much everybody out there wants to see clean vessels. That it's good for fuel consumption, for costs for shipping companies. It's good for GHG emissions and air emissions. It's good for protecting the environment. I think there's a lot of concern about regulating in-water cleaning, regulating the need for vessels to be clean, but vessels not knowing where they will be allowed to clean. So if you want to say that you have to have a clean ship, that's great, but where are you supposed to clean it, right? And how? And so those are the key questions, I think, that will be very, very difficult. The other element of this are some scientific and technical gaps. So we're moving quickly into this space with a regulatory program because there's obviously a need, and Lisa spoke about that. But as well, we know technology is still developing. There's a lot of work to have less reliance on divers, which creates safety risks. But now we need to say, okay, we're going to do this using automated technology, but we're still developing that technology, or we use remotely operated vehicles to do this work. So there's that element. And then the scientific element of, okay, now I'm cleaning my vessel and I'm vacuuming up all of this stuff that's coming off the ship. Am I doing that effectively? What's the right standard? How good is good enough? Some of these questions are also going to be difficult as we get into the guidelines perspective of it. So I think at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is balance the environmental protection with the operational feasibility, because it's great to set high standards, but if nobody can meet them, then it doesn't work. So how can we push towards the best, but still be in a situation where it's achievable and we're able to keep ships moving.
Yeah. Thank you for that answer. Now, relating it a little bit to what you were talking about the in-water cleaning, Captain Castro, under which conditions is in-water cleaning allowed in Brazil?
Okay. So reactive in-water cleaning generally is only permitted when performed with a capture system. But when I say capture system, it's not like, it doesn't need to be like a ROV, because we know it's not available everywhere. I mean, even the diver with the net, with another dive in the net, we need to be feasible. So we are not demanding for a high technology because it's not available. So it could be done after obtaining the authorization. I mean, the ship needs to, submit the documentation, the request form. And when the cleaning method involves diving, as mentioned before, that should be a sort of, a process that is according to another Maritime Authority standard, number 222. And in some cases, the environmental body could be involved as well. And then for operations within port areas, also it was mentioned before me, could be necessary an additional authorization from the port authority. And the other condition is when the in-water cleaning is the proactive one. So this one, I mentioned it also very quickly in my presentation. This one does not require prior authorization. However, the vessel must notify the local maritime authority in advance and provide information and, the planned location and the period of operation. So the cleaning operations without capture also, it's a possibility, may be authorized on very specific conditions. This one I haven't explained it because it's a little bit, tricky to explain in a short presentation. But such authorization may be granted, for instance, when the vessel can demonstrate that the biofouling organisms are located to the area where the cleaning will be performed. So this assessment may be supported, of course, by evidence. The vessel must submit the port call history since the last inspection or cleaning, and also records from the biofouling record book, AIS data, or other relevant information that proves that condition, I mean.
Okay. Thank you so much, Captain. Because I did like that you mentioned that it's also important to understand what you mentioned at the beginning of also understand what is available locally to do this in water cleaning. So I think that's another thing that should be considered. On my last round of questions, last question for Dr. Drake. Is AI used in water cleaning and imaging?
Yeah, there are some companies that use AI to help position autonomous cleaning robots on ships. And this is the perfect application. In image analysis is the perfect application for AI. And I think as capabilities increase, like all other sectors, we can imagine that it'll be increasingly applied here. One can imagine in the future, as there's more and more sensors deployed on ships and in ports, and we look at water quality and organisms and traces of organisms through environmental DNA, could potentially use all that data to have some predictive analyses about biofouling on surfaces, whether they're in ports or underway. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Yeah, honestly, finally, we're glad that we're using AI also for environmental protection. So awesome to know.
Yep.
Dr. Henai, how can ports support the availability of in-water cleaning?
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. First of all, I think the role of ports is going to be absolutely crucial. We know that environmentally responsible cleaning services are kind of limited in their availability worldwide right now, and there's going to be a need for a lot more of those in-water cleaning services based at ports. And I should say again, there are technologies that are being developed for cleaning by the ship while it's underway. Some of those technologies are already existing and are out there, but ships that are not investing in these technologies that are carried with the ship are going to have to clean in ports. And so that's going to be very important for ports to support that. So what can ports do? I mean, we can talk maybe a bit about partnerships. Ports that are interested in getting started early can be working with shipping companies and in-water cleaning companies, maybe on pilot projects to host some testing or some development of in-water cleaning technologies. And once this technology and as this technology, and some of it is already getting to be fairly mature, partnering with in-water cleaning service providers to scale up the capacity and contribute to the global availability of in-water cleaning services. In terms of the port itself, I think what incentives and what support can be provided in terms of that infrastructure. We saw some of those pictures of what it takes to set up an in-water cleaning facility at a port. So looking at availability of space for that and what's going to be required. And just ensuring that port staff are aware of biofouling and biofouling management and aware of what's going to be changing. Maybe the last thing I would say is just to, engage. Engage with your administration. The work that we are doing in the correspondence group really benefits when we have that expertise and experience that's shared that comes through the national representatives. So if ports are undertaking or have experience in biofouling management, engage with your administration and make sure that what we're doing internationally is informed by your local efforts and experience and expertise.
Excellent. Yeah, I do agree with these things have to do in a collaborate matter. Ports cannot do things by themselves. It's important that we all, like the stakeholders in the port, must comply and be working together to carry out this important initiative. So thank you for that answer, Dr. Henai. And last question for Captain Castro. This is a little bit more specific to Brazilian regulations, but I thought it was important to ask. The Brazilian regulation states that the validity of cleaning report may be lost when vessels remain stationary. How does the regulation define the stationary vessel?
Okay, good one, Sabina, because I only mentioned stationary, but I haven't defined it during the presentation. So for us, for the regulation, a vessel is considered stationary when it operates outside the regime, the parameters recommended by the coating manufacturer. Usually there is a speed over time parameters, and if the vessel operates outside this, it's going to be stationary. However, when such information is not available, could happen. A vessel will be classified as stationary if it remains, stopped or operates under speeds below 10 knots for more than 15 days, consecutive days. So under these circumstances, the validity of the inspection or the cleaning report may be revoked. So the ship, the vessel will need to obtain a new inspection or cleaning report before entering the Brazilian jurisdictional waters or crossing the biogeographic regions.
Excellent. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Well, with that, I'm going to end our Q&A session, and I will hand over the floor to my boss, Mr. Jorge Duran, who will give the final remarks. Jorge, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sabi, and thank you so much to our three speakers. Let me see if this works. Yeah, that's better. Thank you so much for your participation and donating your time and everything. I quickly want to reply to Hakeem Mohammed, who writes that, the Inter-American Committee on Ports and Port Authorities and international partners, and can we help somehow collaborate more closely with regions such as Yemen and the Horn of Africa and whatnot? The answer to that, Hakeem, is that the Inter-American, as its name implies, Committee on Ports is devoted to the American hemisphere. So even though we do have relationships and collaborative relationships with the International Association of Ports and Harbors, with the International Port Community Systems Association, amongst many others, our job, our focus, by the mandate of the member states that make up the committee, which are all the sovereign states in the Americas, is the Americas. But anything that we can and will do, and this is part of the thing that we do to sort of disseminate and popularize knowledge as widely as possible, are these webinars, which are free of charge, as you very well know. But thank you for the question. Anyway, getting back to this, I did take some notes. I love the way that Lisa planned and the team planned this webinar, because Lisa gave us the bare bones. She told us what it is, how biofouling is formed with a biofilm. She spoke even from our teeth to the hull of the vessel. The more organisms, the more drag, the more fuel, because there's less efficiency. And then there's a penalty. 10%, she estimates, that is wasted on fuel costs because of the drag. She also talked about cleaning the hulls, reducing the invasive species. She gave us some $345 billion over the last 20 years or something about by the cost that this does in changing the ecology. She did speak about some solutions as coating, which is the number one that everybody uses. But of course, cleaning, in-water cleaning, the return of investment, she talked about that. So it is not an expense, people. It is an investment that if you invest in this, you will see that investment paid off. It is not an expense. Believe me, an expense would be to do nothing. Then will be very expensive to take care of it later. So she talked about that and the hull cleaning technology, the ISO standards, and she ended talking about ports and the need of ports, or rather the role of ports, as having to have more service providers so that biofouling is managed with all the multiple benefits. So those are the quick take homes that I took from Lisa. And then Colin spoke sort of with the same topic, but a different perspective, where I see the IMO guidelines and programs. And of course, the most important point I think Colin made is that we need binding legislation that goes across the board. He did speak about ports and the cleaning, or the important role they have in cleaning, regulations, standards, and then conditions. And then he spoke a little bit about microplastics, about reducing the air pollution, the greenhouse gas pollution, and prevention of that. And there's some problems, or rather some challenges, in how to inspect and apply that compliance that is being drafted on the IMO's guidelines and regulations. Do you guys need some objectives and regulations to be developed and you hope to have a legal framework by 2029. Here, highlighting obviously the importance of international collaboration, because everybody needs to work on this on the same page. Otherwise, it'll be a futile effort. And finally, Cecilia from the Brazilian Maritime Authority talked a lot and focused on the practical thing, on inspecting and enforcing the existing regulations, the legal amendment that they've done to their law, in order to, which is also based on the IMO guidelines. So this is where you can see how the IMO's work is very important. She spoke about oils, ballast water, hormone anti-fouling systems, and the biofouling management. A plan. She talked about the plan, a record book, inspect, and of course the rule is that every ship that arrives to Brazil must arrive with a clean hull, right? So that is a very tall order, but I think is where you need to start. You need to start at 100% compliance, with all these ships being included. Now, of course, Brazil is so big and has so much coast that I saw the map in the different ecological regions that you have within Brazil. So, it is not an easy challenge, but her message here is that it is better to be proactive than to be reactive, which is what I was saying earlier about this being an investment and not an expense. So those were my take homes. I hope that I did you guys justice in paying attention to your presentations. And that said, again, thank you very much. Please open up your mics, and I'm going to go in the order: Cecilia, Lisa, and the gentleman at the end, Colin. Please give us some final thoughts and on some final words to the audience. Cecilia, favor.
Okay, so thank you all for your time, your attention. I am available through the email. I wrote it down in the chat. And thank you, Jorge, Sabina, and Monica, for the opportunity to be here to join this very important webinar. We are dealing with, we are facing very, very, high level challenges in Brazil to implement it. But I do think we are in the right way. We have biodiversity, is amazing biodiversity and we did the same with ballast water. We implemented a national regulation before the convention entered into force. So we are doing exactly as you said, Jorge. We are being proactive. And I think that's the way of dealing with things that can change completely our lives, So thank you very much. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Lisa, my darling, please go ahead.
Thank you so much to SIP and fellow speakers and everybody online. Really appreciate this opportunity. It's a privilege to be here. Jorge, I thought your summation was totally on point, so well done there. I was really pleased with what came out of this. One immediate outcome is this discussion about Colombia looking to Brazil for collaboration. I mean, that's what this is for, right? And to echo a point that Colin made, awareness and training will be really important, and awareness of the topic will be really important at individual ports and countries as we go forward. So look forward to participating more in discussions with that. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lisa. And before I give the floor to Colin, let me remind the audience that thanks to the graciousness of our panelists, their presentations in PDF format are available at the SIP portal. And I wrote the specific part of webinar, but I'm going to ask my teammate Monica Blanco or Savi to please write it again for those people who came in a little late so that they can have the link where they can see, importantly, not only the presentations of this wonderful webinar, but the presentations that we have given in over 80 webinars since 2020. So there are webinars in cybersecurity, in port security and protection, in sustainable development, in digitalization, in free trade, in corporate social responsibility, in city-port relationship, in gender equity. There are so many different topics and so many useful high-level presentations like these in the portal that I highly encourage you to at least take a look at it. Colin, my friend.
Yes, and thank you, and really, I want to say thank you to everyone. Lisa, thank you for organizing and doing a lot of work to pull together the panel. That was very well done and very helpful. Cecilia, thank you for a wonderful presentation and a lot of helpful information on what's happening concretely in Brazil. Jorge, thank you for the invitation to be here. To Sabina and Monica, thank you so much for moderating and for all of the help in setting this up. But really, to those of you who have come to get involved in this topic, and I'll just maybe end by just restating what I said earlier, which is that everybody has a role in engaging with the organizations and administrations that are going to shape the new global regulations on biofouling. And we would welcome everyone's expertise and experience to come up through those delegations that are participating. So thank you very much, and look forward to connecting with people again.
Indeed, indeed. I think that this is an issue that we need to make more noise, you guys. We need to bring it up to people's attention because I don't think it's getting the recognition it deserves, at least at the port level where I work at, which is why I was so interested in having this webinar, because it is the first time that the SIP deals, addresses, or informs about biofouling, and the more I learn about it, the more I think we should continue to work at it, and rally people to the cause. Like Savi said, nobody needs to reinvent the wheel. The best practices are out there, the knowledge, the experts. You just need to go access them and get that knowledge, right? And then, as we say in Latin America, you tropicalize it to your needs, to your own country's needs. So certainly very interesting. I was very enlightened to learn a lot more than I thought I knew. And I thank you, and I thank you all for your participation. This will be the last webinar of the first semester of the year. So our next webinar will probably be in July. And I'm going to talk to the team to see if we can have a part two of this webinar, where we don't go over the same things, but take it from where you guys left it and continue the conversation forward. So we'll try and do that. In the meantime, Cecília, muito obrigado. Sabina, muito obrigado pela sua moderação. Lisa, thank you so much for joining the CIP, and we'll see you next week in Barbados in the ministerial meeting. And Colin, we thank Transport Canada and the IMO for your participation. In the meantime, I'm going to ask the speakers to remain so that we get transferred to the VIP room. But to the audience, we do this for you. This is all for you. This is all in order to communicate knowledge and best practices and new issues that are important to the port and maritime sector to all of you. So thank you for attending. We are indeed blessed that you pay attention to us and that you make our work worthwhile. So we will see you in our next webinar in July. Así que hasta la próxima, amigos. Until next time, thank you so much to all of you.
Thanks.
It has been a fantastic event. The Inter-American Committee on Ports presented today a high-level conversation on biofouling and its impact on healthier oceans and sustainable ports across the Americas. Dr. Lisa Drake from Drake Marine Environmental Services, Dr. Colin Henine from the International Maritime Organization, and Captain Cecilia de Castro from the Brazilian Maritime Authority shared visions that mark the path forward for marine environmental protection in our region. We look forward to welcoming you at our next CIPOAS webinar. See you soon.